This is Faith and Fantasy with Kat Kensington. Here I get to talk about the random and seemingly unusual places I find spiritual truths and lessons for the soul, as I get to bring to life my favorite scripture, Moses 6:63, quote, "All things have their likeness, and all things are created and made to bear record of me, both things which are temporal and things which are spiritual, things which are in the heavens above and things which are on the earth, both things above and beneath, all things bear record of me," end quote. Merry Christmas, everyone. I'm excited to get to do a bit of a holiday-themed episode with Christmas just around the corner. It's a topic I am quite fond of and have spoken about with my friends on multiple occasions. Today we are talking about none other than Santa Claus, good old St. Nicholas himself. A small warning before I begin. I will be telling my story about how Santa has been in my life and how he is today. And so I might share some of the grown-up secrets about Santa in case there are any kids around who are trying to snoop on Santa's business. You can shoo them away now. Now, I know Santa is often a divisive topic among parents and families, and I am not here today to tell you whether or not you need to include Santa in your Christmas traditions. That's up to everyone personally to decide. And please remember that we can all still love and respect others even if they choose to live a little differently, because we're meant to be different. So please respect others and my decision to choose how we celebrate. The reason I want to talk about this today is because I feel like the way I was taught about Santa Claus was personally something that helped me spiritually. We might as well start with a little bit of history. St. Nicholas is known to be centered around the story of a monk who lived around 280 AD in modern-day Turkey. St. Nicholas was known for his overwhelming generosity and charity work. Quote, "It is said that he gave away all of his inherited wealth and traveled the countryside helping the poor and sick. One of the best-known St. Nicholas stories is the time he saved 3 poor sisters from being sold into slavery or prostitution by their father by providing them with a dowry so they could marry," unquote. The story and image of St. Nick has gone through changes and interpretations throughout the years, but his core remains the same. He was a master gift giver full of joy and generosity. So how did Santa help my spirituality? I've come up with 2 reasons. 1, it was a model for faith and love, and 2, it taught emulation of goodness. Let's go ahead and start with the first reason. It was a model for faith and love. There have actually been studies about how exposure to things like fairy tales can have positive effects on children and their development. In a research article entitled "The Positive Impacts of Fairy Tales for Children," it says, quote, "Based on the Jungian interpretation, fairy tales teach children how to deal with basic human conflicts, desires, and relationships in a healthy way. Acquiring these skills can ultimately impact a child's health, quality of life, or even influence its values and beliefs in the future." The Jungian interpretation, developed by psychotherapist Carl Jung, is a symbolic approach that creates a dialectical relationship between consciousness and the unconscious, end quote. So what does this mean, and how does it relate to Santa? To explain that, I want to quote a much beloved show in our household, Bluey. This episode was aptly named Fairy Tale. After the dad reads the story of Hansel and Gretel to his daughters, his youngest asks this question: "Are fairy tales true or not true?" "Well, what do you mean by true?" "I mean, did it happen for real life?" "Well, no, but it's got true things in them." How fairy tales function in our lives, and especially for children, is providing a smaller scale example of how life works and how conflicts can be resolved. Quote, "Fairy tales are often shaped to test children's initiative. Not only is reading the story essential, but having the child act out the story is also just as important for developing a child's consciousness and for his or her moral development. In make-believe performances, the child acquires the experience of being a subject, becoming something or someone else, which comes to him or her as an internal picture of an initiative-taking action," end quote. In the early days of the church, and I'm talking about Old Testament times, the story of Job was and still is often debated as to whether or not it actually happened. But the fact of the matter is that story, whether literal or not, is meant to teach us something true by means of example. Santa, in this same way, became a more tangible way for me to learn about generosity, charity, and altruism. To me, the results of my actions were more measurable and visible. The embodiment of these attributes was more attainable, and I was able to encounter them more literally with the help of my parents and the people around me. So how did my parents help with this exercise in faith? Let me tell you about my personal experience with Santa. "He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sakes." This is the popular language we hear in regard to Santa. But here's why I think that's not ideal. When you use Santa as a reward, incentive, or even as a threat of punishment for desired behavior, it becomes a model for external validation rather than internal validation. In psychology, quote, Validation can be classified into two main categories: internal validation and external validation. Internal validation is the process of confirming one's beliefs and actions by oneself, while external validation involves seeking confirmation from others, end quote. Purely basing behaviors and actions on the approval of others has proven to lead to harm both in children and adults and causes problems such as low self-esteem, anxiety, and perfectionism. Dr. Aniesa Hanson, PhD, says, quote, "Our fixation on external validation is deeply rooted in childhood conditioning, where our worth became intrinsically tied to our performance, success, and productivity. This upbringing often breeds perfectionism, further perpetuating the cycle of seeking external validation as a means of affirming our value. The more we engage from this subconscious place in our life, the more that hunger for external validation thrives," end quote. The more we use Santa as a prize or a threat, the more fixated upon the reward of the good behavior than the motivation of the behavior becomes. Instead of focusing on the naughty or nice list concept, I suggest another option. This option was the one my parents chose to use, and as I've grown up, I've come to really appreciate it. This was the mantra of Christmas for our family, and you may have heard it before. If you do not believe, you do not receive. And while this may seem like it's the same as if you do not behave, you do not receive, I want to argue why it's not. Belief, unlike behavior, is internally motivated. So instead of using external validation, i.e. rewards or punishments, it shifts the responsibility to me with the use of internal validation, belief. Just like our testimonies, no one else chooses to believe but you. You're the only one who decides how strong your conviction is and how much your belief impacts your motivations and then therefore your actions. And the reason it truly works is that there was no outside accountability for my belief. My parents never even asked. They would just encourage us to do the actions, and then we reaped the benefits of it regardless. We always received every year with no one checking boxes about it. This may seem counterintuitive. If Santa isn't there to reward good behavior, then what is he there for? Well, I would say that God's love and blessings work the same way. God's love is not conditional upon our behavior, and he blesses everyone regardless of how much or how little they believe. And on the same side of that coin, bad things will still happen to people who believe harder than anyone else and to people who don't. What changes is how we perceive the world around us. Instead of viewing presents as a quid pro quo exchange for me being good, it became about watching something extraordinary because someone else loved us enough to make it happen. My brothers and I would open presents not because we were always obedient, but because my parents wanted us to feel love and joy and magic. This is the same with faith in our daily lives. Faith does not make all the bad things go away, nor does it bring us every blessing and every open door we want in life. What it does open our eyes to is the idea that this life does not need to be defined by the struggles we have, nor the blessings we've received. To quote the late President Nelson, quote, "My dear brothers and sisters, the joy we feel has little to do with the circumstances of our lives and everything to do with the focus of our lives," end quote. It is about who we want to be despite all of those things. You can have heaps of struggles and be joyful, just like you can have everything you've ever wanted and be bitter and selfish. This is why stories like The Grinch and The Christmas Carol are so popular and resonate so much, because they testify of this truth. Your character is not determined by what you have, it is about how you choose to live regardless of it. My parents were big on immersion when we were kids. I know this isn't typical or even desirable in many families, but my parents were into Christmas and still are. I remember waking up one year, late at night, with my mom and my dad right beside me, peering through the spindles of the banister, seeing Santa setting presents under our tree. One time, my parents even caught Santa on videotape coming out of the fireplace. Another year, there were sleigh marks in our backyard and pieces of carrots sprinkled around. Other times, I heard bells on Christmas Eve when I was supposed to be asleep, listening for any sign of Santa. Some years there were big things, other years it was little things. But I believed, gosh darn it. And then came the fateful day in 5th grade when a kid said to me the words I never wanted to hear: "Santa isn't real." I definitely didn't believe them. I basically yelled at them and gave all of my evidence to the contrary. I'd seen him, I'd met him before, and I definitely knew he was real. Despite my best arguments, the kid was not listening, and I was downright upset. So when I went home, I told my parents about it. So they told me Santa is real, but maybe not in the way that I thought. They explained St. Nicholas and his impact on the world, and how even though he's no longer living on earth today, his spirit is what lives on inside all of us who believe. The way the spirit of Santa stays alive is by becoming an embodiment of who he was. And I was now in the second part of my Christmas journey, where I got to become Santa too. They explained to me that now I get to go backstage and be a part of the magic for my younger brothers and any others who needed it. And in my heart, I felt excited to be a part of this new chapter. Which leads me to reason number 2. It taught me to emulate goodness. Instead of thinking about all the things I would get for Christmas, I got to work backstage with my parents to plan surprises for my family. I would shop with my dad for my mom, and with my mom for my dad, and find time to search for my brother's presents in between. I got to be included in secrets to bring a little more joy and happiness to someone else, and then got to watch on Christmas morning as their faces light up to see what I had helped give. It made me feel empowered, and that I could have literal impact on others' lives by doing something selfless. It showed me that a little effort and thought for someone else could bring the whole room great joy. And all this because that's what Santa would have done. It's what Christ would have done. The 13th article of faith was always my favorite, and only a little bit because I like to show off that I memorized the longest article of faith. Truly, though, I learned to love and live by what it says. Quote, "We believe in being honest, true, chaste, benevolent, virtuous, and in doing good to all men. Indeed, we may say that we follow the admonition of Paul. We believe all things, we hope all things, we have endured many things, and we hope to be able to endure all things. If there is anything virtuous, lovely, or of good report or praiseworthy, we seek after these things." End quote. To me, Santa is benevolent, virtuous, and does good to all men. And when we exemplify the traits he is known for, we are embodying the attributes of Christ as well. Just like we are told to be Christ's hands here on earth, I think Santa is just another way we can do that, and sometimes it reaches people we can't otherwise. I found this story while pondering this episode's topic, and I will try and recount it without crying, because honestly, when I read it, I ugly cried for a little bit. This story was published in the Liahona this month, actually, and it seemed like it may have also been included in the 2021 December edition as well. It tells a story of a man who got the opportunity to help out a friend who had been hired to play Santa at the local mall. Quote, "As I walked through the mall to get to my place, I was delighted to see how excited the young children were to see Santa. Even adults couldn't help but smile and wave. Once I sat down, the gate to the workshop opened. A long line of parents and children kept coming in. All but the very shyest children climbed up on my knee, and I listened patiently while they told me their Christmas wishes. A woman brought a small boy to me. 'Excuse me,' she said. 'He just wanted to come and say hello.' I invited him to sit on my lap, but she declined, explaining that he didn't speak English. 'He's from Belgium,' she said. 'He speaks French.' My first reaction was, oh, this is going to be fun. 9 years earlier, I had served a French-speaking mission in Quebec, Canada. Although I was no longer fluent in French, I could still have a conversation with a 4-year-old. So I turned to the boy and in French invited him to come sit with me. The woman's eyes grew wide and her jaw dropped, but the boy beamed and jumped into my lap. And then I did something out of character for Santa. I felt impressed to tell the boy, 'Always remember that Santa loves you.' I recall instantly thinking, what a strange thing for Santa to say. But the boy hugged me, and then he smiled and waved back and ran to the woman. She led him a few steps away and then stopped. She asked him to wait there and turned back to me. 'I don't know what just happened,' she told me with tears in her eyes, 'but I need to tell you something.' She explained that she was the little boy's aunt. She had returned with him from Belgium only a few days earlier. His mother and father were killed in a car crash, she said. I'm his only living relative. I have just brought him to the United States to live with me. Her tears began to fall more freely. But it's Christmas, and I simply had no idea how we were going to make it through this season. It's supposed to be joyful and magical, but all I could feel was sorrow. I kept praying, God, help us both get through this. She decided to bring him to the mall. I know it seems silly, she continued, but I thought that if we walked around and just looked at the stores and the holiday decorations, it would give us at least a little distraction. But my nephew saw you and said that he had to come see you. I told him, no, honey, Santa won't be able to understand you. But he said, yes, he will. I need to talk to him. And he literally pulled me to you. She looked at me again and said, I don't know how this happened, but thank you. Every Christmas, I still think about that boy. I wonder if he even remembers that night he met me and brought tears to my eyes. I will never forget how God led me to be just where he needed me to be one winter's night to bless one of his precious children." End quote. I don't think it matters whether you wear a beard and a red suit or if you're just there for someone in a time of need. The point is that Christ will use good things and good people to bring about his purposes, regardless of what they look like. I didn't need Santa as a child, but it did become a way for my young growing brain to see a more simple, tangible example of what faith, charity, and magic look like. It was a perfect stepping stone to being able to believe that there is another omniscient and omnipotent being that exists, that he loves me, and he wants me to be like him too. To me, magic isn't only something that exists in fairy tales. It is witnessing the beauty of good overcoming the evil of the world. Whether a man who brings presents in a sleigh with flying reindeer, or a child born of a virgin who would later bring about the redemption of all mankind, magic is seeing the reality that there is something more than just us in this world. So how are you going to find magic in your life today? Thank you so much for listening. I hope today's topic brought a little faith and fantasy into your day. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram for chats and sneak peeks on new episodes. I hope to see you next time, and until then, I hope you find God somewhere unusual today.